Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Alana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the She Means Business podcast. Today, we are delighted to have my colleague and friend, Micheline Davies, to the podcast. Mish has been a Canadian Tire for over 25 years, where she has held progressive roles, starting in the store and moving through merchandising, store ops, and visual merchandising. And she is currently the chief merchant at Canadian Tire Retail, where she oversees a portfolio of over $12 billion, including businesses like automotive, home, and seasonal, and also different services and banners like Canadian Tire's Auto Service, Part Source, and Party City. Mish has been recognized as a WXN Top 100 leader and most recently was named one of Canada's best executives by the Globe and Mail. She also serves on the Automotive Industries Association of Canada board and is a mom of two wonderful boys. A true believer in people, Micheline founded the Canadian Tire Women's Leadership Network in 2014 and supports women across top-tier Canadian businesses through the strategic board of Forward Together. And I can't wait to dive in with her, so let's get into it. So Mish, we just talked about your amazing experience over a number of roles. Is there anything as you look back on your career, and I'm lucky enough to work with you on an ongoing basis and work with that person I just described, but are there any achievements or experiences that you had that you're most proud of as you've gone through? Is it teams, awards? What's really driven you?
Well, gosh. So firstly, thank you so much, ladies, for having me here and for such gracious introduction, Alana. I found myself listening to that and thinking, God, I'd really love to meet that woman. Who is she? For sure, it's the power of people. But I think, so I often say, when I sit back and look at leadership moments, for me, leadership is seeing possibility and making something where there is nothing. So to me, when I think about moments I'm most proud of, when I think about the Women's Leadership Network at Canadian Tire, it was completely born of that. So it was, you often hear from women and from men, from everybody, they want more mentoring, they want more coaching. So I had started up, again, from nothing, a mentoring program. It ran for a number of years. Then once I had my sons, I kept seeing a number of different women coming my way saying, you know what, give me advice. How did you think about having kids? How do you do it? I can't believe she does this. And you make it look so easy. And I realized, I was like, oh gosh, here we are at one of those tipping points, right? Where if you pay attention to the weak signals that are out there, you realize people are looking for something. So again, how do you take a moment and turn it into a movement? It was find some like-minded women who are passionate about development, passionate about creating women's leaders, supporting women in the workplace. We brought them together to say, okay, women have identified a need that they, especially as they start to contemplate families, they want better, they want more, they want safe spaces. So pay attention to those cues, bring people together. This was a decade ago, long before, DE&I initiatives, to say, how could we support women? So from that moment in 2014, Lana, we basically got together and said, what's the art of the possible? And landed on a mandate where we wanted to connect women, inspire them, and challenge to be their best selves. Our goal was to create better women by doing it grassroots, by coming together and supporting each other. So to me, that's a great example of an achievement I feel really, really proud of.
And what level were you at when you did that, when you started that movement?
I was a VP. So I was a vice president. I think I'd already had a pretty good track record of being able to mobilize people towards something and was well regarded as a coach and mentor of women. So it made it easy and credible for me to move into that space.
So tell us about a time in your career, Mish, where you had a setback or something wasn't going your way.
About a time when I had a setback. Well, Gail, a setback is what happens every day. So
a big one. Was there a big one that you were like, okay, I'm derailing me? This is derailing me.
Okay, so I'll admit I'm a very driven person. So I'm type A. I value being in action. I value achievement, getting things done, making stuff happen. So that's a fantastic superpower. And the underbelly, every superpower has an underbelly. The underbelly of that is I'm impatient, right? So it's never enough. It's never quite fast enough. So for me, I'd say my biggest setback was really at a couple of career transitions where I felt like things were simply not happening on the pace that I wanted. Why am I not getting advanced as quickly? Why are things not happening for me? Why are people not noticing the great things that I'm doing? So I think that despite the fact that, I felt like these career transitions were taking forever, I think I had a few moments where I realized I could wind up in a scenario where I focus on all the things that are negative and really break down. They say comparison is the thief of joy. So why don't I just park that, continue to play my own game, right? It's my path to architect, and to realize that what I've realized time and again when people come to me with the same thing, why am I not getting there faster? It's staying laser focused on the prize, on what it is you want, chipping away towards it. And if it's taking longer, you got one of two things to do here. One is you're just going to be that much better when you get there because you've had so much longer trajectory to build up your toolkit. Like 100% proven. I've never seen that not be the case. The other one, quite frankly, is for you to realize your career is a long-term game, right? And it's not measured in months and weeks. It's measured in years and in deliverables and in creating meaning for yourself. So if your path isn't going to be the straight line you wanted, how do you continue to create meaning for yourself? So things like creating a women's network, things like joining a board, things like volunteering for an event, do things that fill your cup up while you are waiting.
I love that you gave that example because I feel I empathize with that. I feel like I've had those moments multiple times in my career. And I would admit that oftentimes at those intersections, I chose to leave because I was impatient and I wanted to get there faster. And interestingly, you didn't. So you have stayed with the same employer for a very long time, especially in this day and age when people are jumping and hopping and moving around. So can you tell us a little bit more about that decision? How did you know that there was something there to stay for versus jumping ship to say, you know what, the will to want to move faster is stronger?
Yeah, so I think it's a totally legitimate question because I will admit there are times when I sit there and listen to people, right, with impressive CVs where they've moved through progressive organizations where I feel, did I make the right decision? Am I a dinosaur in today's terms? But when I sit back and reflect on it, I'm fortunate to work for a company that's as broad and differentiated as Canadian Tire. So we've got so many different business units. There's retail banners and Canadian Tire and Sport Check and Marks. We have a bank. We have a REIT. We own the Helly Hansen brand in Norway. We have offices in Toronto. We have offices in Calgary. We've got, robust customer loyalty, analytics, digital functions. So Canadian Tire over the last number of decades has evolved into like a series of businesses under one roof. So that would be the first thing I'd say. When you step back, I don't think it's as simple as I've worked in one company. I've worked in a bunch of different businesses while I've done that. So I've worked in operational roles at Canadian Tire. I've worked in project roles where the team has designed and deployed technology and processes. I've worked in store operations where I got to lead the store design and space planning functions. That's like designing and building Canadian Tire stores and the shopping experience. To me, that's hugely meaningful, very interesting and different work. It had me in the real estate and construction space. But the bulk of my career has been in merchandising. And so folks aren't familiar with the term. That's really around product procurement and product buying, product sourcing. I've had the opportunity to run seasonal businesses like patio furniture, barbecue, Christmas, gardening. I've, spent time in automotives. Yes, I've dealt in automotive hard parts and tires and auto service.
Sounds riveting.
It's awesome. Well, it's interesting because you look at it and like as a young girl, did I think I'd be sitting here talking to you about alternators and starters and, spark plugs? And the answer is no, but every industry and every context presents such unique challenges. I basically get to solve complex strategic problems. I get to really work at, what's happening competitively, what capabilities do we need to get ahead? And I think that everything that unfurls is a net new opportunity to unpack. And frankly, a net new team with a different set of knowledge and skill set for me to lean into. So it's almost been, although it's been decades I've been in the same place, it's never been the same role. And it's almost like working for a net new leadership team each time you delve into the new context. So it's been highly energizing for me.
I can totally see that. And obviously Canadian Tire is an incredible place to be able to do that. On the flip side, What advice can you give to people who are working for a similar type organization where there is so much opportunity and yet they feel like they're stuck in this like lateral move merry-go-round? I've talked to many people who are like, I've been a manager at like 4 different places now, or I've been I can't seem to get to a manager or a director level because everybody keeps telling me, no, well, maybe just go try it, do it this job, another lateral move. And like, what advice can you give to those people who feel like they're stuck?
Oh yeah, the merry-go-round. I mean, it's real for some folks, right? I mean, I was on a number of merry-go-rounds myself, but what I'd say is it's surprising the degree to which people aren't actually sure of what success looks like for them personally. So I always say, like, first and foremost, like, do you aspire to a higher stratum? If so, what level are you aspiring to? So get clear on that and what that might look like. Then secondly, it's to say, okay, like in what domains, in what sort of areas of expertise does it make sense for you so that you've got actually something that you're scaffolding and working towards, as opposed to making that rookie mistake we all make, which is in impatience, you're going to jump at the first promotion you have, irrespective of whether or not it actually gets you to the goal that you have. So it's, knowing where you want to get to, having a sense of what that looks like, what are the skills that are required, and then starting to architect it from there by looking around, staying in regular dialogue with people for whom you think they've done a really good job of navigating the organization or navigating different career choices to evaluate what are the steps along the way. So that, okay, I aspire to be a leader in the digital space. Okay, I know what skills to acquire along the way. But I think even more so than that, people fail to take into account the relationships you need to build along the way. Yeah. So who are going to be my cabinet of folks who are there helping me to understand my degree of readiness, helping me fill in some of the gaps, because it's not always your boss, and who are going to be there to advocate for me when the time comes and the role that I believe is going to be my next step up becomes, a shoe-in or a much easier conversation for me to have. So it's knowing where you're going, filling in steps along the way, and having the people around you to help propel you into the place that you want to get to.
Hey, Mish, from a personal perspective, have you ever taken a role where you weren't sure where it was leading, but it ended up being a really great place to go? Or in hindsight, you thought to yourself, why did I do that? And then you realize how many skills that you acquired when you did it?
Yes, that's happened.
It's a leading question.
I actually don't know the answer to that one.
So when I was first offered a role in automotive, so I had just come off some project work, some IT project, and the feedback for me at that point in time was, you should take on an operational role. I remember thinking, I don't need an operational role. Okay, people, you need an operational role. Like, try to do both. And just not because you have to, and because it just opens up so much more possibility for you, right? When you've got more breadth. And the role offered to me was this automotive operations manager. And I remember thinking, oh God, like automotive, are you kidding me? I went to talk to the hiring manager, who was this man named Greg Hicks. So you might have heard of him. He's now the CEO of Canadian Tire. And I actually remember turning the script on him and saying, like, why should I take this job? What in hindsight really makes me laugh. It took a lot of nerve to ask that.
I love it.
But I just remember at the time, I think it was a function of, one, my discomfort in the space. Like, again, I worked at a store. I had some familiarity with auto parts and that space, but to go in there and now to operate a business unit that's all related to automotive hard parts and batteries, et cetera, was certainly a turn like into left field for me. But what I'd say is, like, that single move got me working with somebody who's just an exceptional leader in Greg, where I learned so much, where he took me on a journey through different roles and promoted me to different roles. And guess what? I'm the chief merchant today as a function of having spent time in automotive, which is a critical business unit at Canadian Tire, which led me to be able to become the senior vice president of automotive, which enabled me to move into the chief merchant role. Canadian Tire has such a diverse platform of products. And to me, like, real leaders at Canadian Tire have spent time in our seasonal businesses, where they understand the ebbs and flows of when you have weather, when you don't have weather, as well as being able to navigate a space like automotive, where the business moves at a very different pace and has very different complexity. So what I'll say, in the moment, what felt like, gosh, that's a pretty clinical institutional space, this automotive industry, wound up absolutely being the best call I made in my career.
It's an amazing story. I didn't know it, but it's a very, very interesting and very introspective thing to kind of look back and say, like, how it can really shape you. So it's great. So Let's build on that a little bit. You talked a little bit about WXN and the movement that you created. You've mentored yourself dozens of people. You're well known as an amazing mentor to many. I'm curious, as you look back at all the people you've mentored, what are your observations of people coming up? You talked about a little bit about I love that quote, comparison as the thief of joy, which I'm sure is one of the observations you have. Are there any others, maybe in general, but specifically for women, that you notice in terms of your observations on that?
Oh man, I've had so many career chats and, mentoring chats. I feel almost like I've got a bit of a coaching playbook at this point. But like, I know it depends on where you're at in your career, but I think fundamentally the core advice pretty much remains the same. And I know it sounds pretty basic, but I honestly think that the stuff that's the most basic is usually the stuff we overlook or we undervalue. So firstly, I always say, know what success looks like in your role and ensure that you're delivering against it. Too many people miss out on the key step around, setting robust objectives, aligning to them with your boss, and then hustling to deliver them. Because to me, the key to advancement is proving you can deliver value to your team and the organization. And objectives is the unlock here. And if you're a people leader and you're not spending the time to build meaningful objectives for yourself and your team, like, you're not leading effectively. Like, you absolutely need to be laser focused. And then as I think about women in particular, my main advice is be like Nike, just do it. Right? So take the lead. Don't hold back. And it's funny talking to Gail and Alana because you're definitely team Nike here. Just do it, get her done. But I mean, don't hold back. Don't play small. Or most importantly with women, don't wait until everything's perfect to put yourself out there. One of the single biggest differences I observe between men and women is confidence. Like, some people say confidence, for me, it's more self-doubt. Like, the degree of self-doubt that women have, it seems like they just seem to adore it. And like, they're going to wear it like a comfy blanket. Like, come on, doubt, like, come and snuggle up with me. And what would it look like? Even just to put in people's heads, shifting the mindset around, yanking off that blanket, seeing the possibility around you, saying yes to the assignments, you identifying the opportunities where you can step up and lead, and to not wait. Then the next one I always say is get comfortable with the F word. And I don't mean that F word. I mean like the one that's even worse, which is feedback.
Ooh, I did not see that coming. Sorting in my mind F words, and that did not come up.
That's the real F word, because I know I'm supposed to be here and say, I was a leader, a distinguished leader. I love feedback. I don't love feedback. I don't think anybody actually loves feedback. Because I know I could take a mountain of positive feedback and push it to the side and focus on the two little things that you told me were areas that I need to focus on and fixate on it. So what I'd say is the earlier you start, the better. If you can get into a rhythm of soliciting feedback from your boss, from your peers, heck, from the people around you, because who you are isn't just the way you show up at work. Trust me, the way you show up at work is, generally speaking, the way you show up in life. So get that feedback, because I think most importantly in life and at work, the key to your growth, satisfaction, your happiness is self-awareness. So you need to know who you are, what do you stand for, what makes you tick. So it's things like, what are the formative experiences that grew you into the unique person you are today? So, we're all a product of our environments, our upbringing, the choices that we make along the way. And I think about Brené Brown. She says it best. And as soon as I read this, I was like, that's it in a nutshell. She says, who we are is how we lead. Stop.
Ooh.
Right? Who we are is how we lead. So for me, for instance, I believe I've grown into an, independent, resourceful woman who gets bleep done as a function of growing up with a single mom in a very challenging household where I had to step up, do things for myself. And I had to hustle my way through life. I learned that nobody was going to do stuff for me. I had to take charge. Things were going to happen. It was on me. So I saw stepping up and achieving as a way to pull myself out of that reality. And I think it drives me today. It's at the origin of who I am and what I value, what I hold dear as a function of growing up that way. So I think it's critical to know yourself, to know what are your personal values. And if you think about it, like, they're the things that drive you day in and day out, the things you hold true, the things that create meaning for you. And I'd say, like I said earlier, on the underbelly side of things that can hold you back. But it's so important to know those things. So
what are your values?
What are my values? Well, isn't that interesting that you should ask me? So let me just start with how do you even know what your values are? Like, how do you know what your values are, right? Because I'll say to people, like, be true to your values. They'll say, well, okay,
I don't
like,
know what my values
what
are.
value even mean? Like, what is a value? So what I'd say firstly is take some time. I would say reflect a little bit on two situations. One, when you feel like you're in the groove, right? Like where you're kind of unstoppable, like you're generating, you're feeling powerful. What is it about that situation? What is it about the people around you? Like, because there's stuff there that speaks to what's important to you and what you value. Just like when something's not clicking for you. So whether it's a role, whether it's people you're with, whether it's a choice you've made, trust me, it feels grindy and it feels gross because there's something that's brushing up against a value that you hold true. For instance, a key value I have is around being accountable. So if I'm operating with somebody who is clearly not stepping up, is not, taking accountability and running with something that's theirs, like I can actually viscerally feel it in my belly. And it's like, yes, 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 yes. It's because that brushes up against something I would never do myself because I hold it so true, right? So I'd say, talk to others. How would they describe you? Trust me, talk to like half a dozen people. You'll get some similarities across them. And to get to your question, finally, on what my values are, I actually went through an exercise where I did a card sort. So I think Alana's done this before. So you can Google online, values cards exercise. You can print off sheets with, different values. So do you value, independence? Do you value your health? Do you value closeness with friends? So I went through a card sort. So you basically go through all these cards and you reduce them down to the ones that are the most important. So the ones that I came up with, which still totally hold today, first and foremost was, please don't judge, achievement. It was authenticity, truly being yourself. It was creativity. So on a bad day, I'll say I'm not that creative, but when I step back, there's a number of different ways I think I'm creative and generate. And it was family and friends. So having close relationships. So those are things I hold very, very sacred to me. And I think are fundamentally like what drives me when I think about moving forward. So again, you do a card sort, even in good old Brene Brown, like in her Dare to Lead book where she talks about values, she's got a one pager with a whole bunch of values on it. You can just scan through that thing and say what fits, what doesn't fit.
And I think your point on naming the values is really like, there's no judgment. I mean, I also shockingly would be an achievement
Me too.
value. I have and not surprising. But like, I found that when I labeled that as like, well, oh, that's really interesting because when I don't feel like I'm achieving, I'm not at my best. So it's not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing if you use it for not
Correct.
for good. But labeling it also like empowers you to be able to do what you want to do.
I do think the labels are important because then it lets you get back because then you realize, right? So authenticity to me, I didn't just sort of happen into it. I remember early in my career, being an entry-level job at Canadian Tire and having a director who was 2 levels up who wouldn't make eye contact with us, let alone know my name, let alone engage with us. And I remember at that point in time as a 25-year-old saying, if I'm ever lucky enough to be in a position of leading others, I will absolutely ensure that I'm authentic and that I'm accessible to people. And I would say I hold true to those today, probably to a fault in that I try to be accessible to anyone who needs time. So I know for me, again, that's the underbelly is I give too much sometimes is how do I create some healthier boundaries for myself?
I love that you use the A word. That feels like, especially for women, that they're scared to use to say that they're ambitious or achievement oriented. And I love that you're proud of that. And I am too. I think all three of us are. So you sit on a board of an industry association in the automotive world, which you've mentioned that you've been in and out of quite often over your career, and you've adjusted to this male-dominated industry. How do you feel confident in those settings? So for women who are in, whether it's automotive or not, but in male-dominated fields, what advice do you have for them to feel confident in those settings, in that environment?
Yeah, it's a really important question, right? Because it's not as simple as like, you go girl, like just be you, be your authentic self. I mean, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. So I look back on my career. So our Canadian Tire dealer network is largely male. It's getting much better, but it's largely male. I've worked in real estate and construction, automotive, hard goods businesses. So lots of opportunity to interact with a lot of men. And I'm not going to pretend and say it's easy or that I get treated the same way because I don't always. Unfortunately, there's still some sexism there, although I'd say it's rarely obvious And I think it's rarely intentional. So I will say that. So how do I handle it though? I think for me and what I'd advise others is I always try to show up at my best, to be prepared, to have facts, to have data, to avoid, voicing opinions until you're in a place where you've achieved a certain level of gravitas with the group or respect. You've earned some respect and trust. And then at that point, show up with opinions. I do think for women, we do need to work a little bit harder to show up as authoritative in spaces where they just traditionally don't see women in those spaces. So unless you see it, it's hard to believe it, right? So I take pretty seriously my role in being a leader in spaces and in rooms where there's not a lot of women. But again, I think we have to try a little bit harder because they don't naturally assume that we've got sufficient experience. Again, is it a function of us being women? I think perhaps no. I think it's a function of not having visibility or women having as much experience. So I over-index on, facts, trends, insights, KPIs. Now, I've been fortunate through my career to have a lot of really great male colleagues and collaborators. I would say though, but there's been times for sure when I've experienced different treatment because I'm a woman. I wouldn't say it's that I'm treated poorly. It's that I probably don't have as much access to things as others might have. Access to certain conversations and certain
It's the conversations.
spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a dance for sure. It's situational, how you're going to show up. I think for me, what I'd say to folks is always assume positive intent. So like sometimes it can bleed into a bit of sexism, right? So to me, I always assume positive intent. And I try to actually think about how would my dad have navigated conversations if he was the business person in the room with me, right? So I take a little bit of a paternalistic approach to it to say, like, I don't think my dad would ever demean Gail or Ilana in a conversation. He was just socialized radically differently, right? So it's assume positive intent. Picture my dad there in the other seat. What I would say though, now that I'm older, and again, one of the values I didn't talk about, but that is my my breakthrough value for the balance of my career is courage. It's about stepping up, being brave enough to speak up, speak out when it's done in a way where a situation needs to be unfolded or uplifted, right? So now if I'm in a scenario where, say, there is something that is sexist or is possibly a little bit hostile or a little bit unkind, I think that's where I have some go-to tactics. So tactic numero uno is humor. Ha 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 ha! Look, isn't that funny? I can't believe you said that. So that's tactic number one. Tactic number two is the question. So if somebody says something crummy to you because you're a woman, I'll do the old, oh, sorry, I don't think I quite caught that. What did you just say?
No, the confusion. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, they know damn well you're saying that because they've made a misstep and they will never, ever rephrase the question. Allows them to save a little bit of face, but is still fairly direct. But I think now the stakes are a little bit higher. And those are generally if I'm in, one-on-one type situations or, there's a couple of people. If I'm in a larger room, and particularly if there's women and younger women around me and it's happening, that's definitely when I will step up and say, hey, I'm sure you didn't mean to come across that way, or you didn't mean it this way. But you know what? I don't like being spoken to that way, or it doesn't feel right when you talk to me that way. Mm-hmm. I think you need to role model it. And it's not following up with the person afterwards. Like, yes, that's important if you haven't had enough courage to deal with it in the moment, but you need to be present when it happens in front of the people who are receiving those messages. You can't just around the corner, send a little DM and say, by the way, when you said that, it wasn't cool. No, people need to hear and see you advocating for it because it normalizes that those conversations aren't okay.
That's good.
I'm happy to say, I've only had to do that maybe twice in my career that overtly, but felt good when I did.
Good for you. So you talked a little bit about WLN, Women's Leadership Network at Canadian Tire. Obviously, you've been recognized as an incredible leader, both kind of internally and from external sources. As you look back on your career, we often ask about advice you'd give your younger self, but I actually would like to pivot a little bit and ask, when you look back on your career, what is the legacy that you hope that you have left when you decide to move on?
Wow, what a great question. Because certainly being more senior in your career, you want to spend the time thinking about what's left. And there's the easy answers, which so I'll leave the place better than it was before. But here, I often find myself saying that the sign of an evolved human is when you can give to others the things you didn't get yourself. So again, This little girl, when she was growing up, did her own laundry at age 7, made her own lunches for school. There was no one there to do that for me. So for me, the legacy is for the women who come up and the women leaders who come up behind me don't have to face the same barriers because I was there to help remove them. So for me, my legacy is going to be a pipeline of powerful and empowered women who believe and know deep in their hearts that they have the skills and abilities to make themselves more successful. The business will take care of itself if we've got the right women. So to me, whether it's a one-on-one conversation with someone who says, I achieved this level, or I accomplished this task that I never thought I could do as a result of either the Women's Network or a job you gave me at point in time or a piece of coaching that you gave me, to me, the legacy is the people who are going to be here to continue to blaze the path and create access for more and more women. So how do you create scale with really awesome women? That's the legacy I want.
Well, I feel like that's a mic drop because your ability to articulate that is just amazing. And you have made such a lasting legacy for the people who've come up behind you. I know I'm someone, as I was coming up, you were a bit ahead of me, and I always looked up to you as a mentor, even though I didn't know you very well. So you've had a lasting impact on so many. So with that, maybe we'll say thank you, Mish. We're so thrilled to have had you on here. You had so many, I was writing down things as you were talking for myself, like, oh my goodness. Yes. So we can't thank you enough for being here and imparting your wisdom on us and our listeners. And we'll look forward to continuing to see you shine over the coming years in your role and in your future.
It's a pleasure. Honestly, it's a pleasure to be collaborating with women who, again, are looking to uplift, develop, and create next generation leaders. So you are living it in this moment. So thank you for that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mish.
Thanks, Mish. Wow. I need a minute. That was incredible. She is so wise. I had so many takeaways. I was writing furiously the whole time that she was talking. And I just love her perspective on the, longevity of careers, her approach to leading people, her true commitment to her values and herself and how she leads.
Yeah, I agree. And it's evident in her leadership, obviously very aligned to the sum of the parts is greater, like your outcome is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that if you can recognize that and realize that earlier in your career you can realize it, the better off you are in terms of achieving your potential, because it's really through the people you lead that you can actually achieve. What I've really found, I mean, Mish is a little bit of a unicorn in terms of like being at the same place for such a long time. And I think I really liked the way she described how she describes her journey, because I think sometimes we get itchy. I use that word itchy, right? It's like, oh, well, like I'm not getting as fast. It's and you're kind of itchy to like, I'm either moving or I'm leaving. And I think you hit on it, Gail, like you've left at times because of that. Yeah. And I think the way she talked about, I mean, I love this. I wrote it down. The comparison is the thief of joy, right? When you're looking sideways and, 10 years into your career looking sideways, you're like, I'm not where I should be. And then, 10 years later, you're like, oh, well, it all kind of evens out in the wash. And then this ability to be able to see the different experiences you get in a company, even though they're at the same company, versus thinking, oh, I'm just at one company, so it's just one experience, is really, really, I just very insightful.
Well, and she, I think, breaks the mold in terms of, just because you've been somewhere for 25 years doesn't make you a dinosaur. It doesn't mean you're not ambitious. It doesn't mean you're not striving to learn more and develop yourself. And also, like, you don't feel sorry for yourself because, oh, I've been here for 25 years. Like, I think it's incredible. She's an amazing leader, and she's managed to do so much in that one organization. I love that she told this story about taking that one job in automotive.
Yes.
And working for Greg Hicks because, oh my God, what a full circle moment. And now he's the CEO. And I think it's a great lesson. I was thinking of my old team of buyers. Buyers are often moved around and required to take on categories that they're maybe not as passionate about. I think that's true of even people in marketing who are in CPG or something. And, this idea of, okay, just know that you will learn something. I genuinely believe that. And I've told my team that many, many times of like, sometimes you won't even know what you learned until years later where you're like, oh, that's what that was for. Okay. And it's not even the thing that you thought it was. It's not necessarily learning that category or that business. It's some other skill or some connection that you made with a leader or a person who will serve you in another life. It's a seed that's planted.
I agree. And I think, as any of us, depending on where you are in your career, as you think about the choices that you've made from a career perspective, I'm sure all of us can look back and say, like, was there a time I should have or could have or did take a role that I wasn't quite sure what it would give me? And I really, it would be an interesting survey question, speaking to someone who used to do surveys, on like how many people really regret doing that. And I suspect the number would be very low, because those experiences are what leads you to kind of where you are today. So you can't regret them, but I
would even argue that if you regret it, you're not looking deep enough.
Right.
There's something that you got out of it. Even like my worst jobs that I hated, I still don't regret.
Yep. And I think that ties a little bit, and, just not to put too fine a point on it, is we've talked about values before. I think if you tie values with what she said about people, and you're a people leader, and you know who you are, then you can really figure out it's not the title of the role. It's really about how you leverage kind of your strengths, bring out your values, how you work with people. You can find growth in anything that you do.
Absolutely. I want to put an exclamation point on the comment she made on the blanket of self-doubt, because, oh my God, like that hit home for me so much. And I don't know if that comes from women being trained to be modest, or like, I don't know where that's from, but I feel like that is so true. And I want to just encourage anybody listening, women in particular, to just take that blanket off if you are wearing one.
Yeah.
And just go for it and just do it. As she said, be Nike. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, no, both those things. And I think that the naming it of the blanket of self-doubt versus be more confident. Well, the reason you're not being more confident is this blanket of self-doubt. So if you really visualize it, and you say, I'm going to shed the cloak of doubt, self-doubt, and therefore will appear or be more confident. It's an action to a thing that's named.
Well, and you're going to the source. You're going
exactly.
to, rather than.
I love that.
Yeah, because it makes sense of if you're telling somebody who's wearing a cloak or a blanket of self-doubt to be more confident, well, they can't because they're wearing it. So first take it off.
Get to the root of the self-doubt, and that will make you. So yeah, absolutely. Again, I took notes for myself.
Yeah.
I have an action list, and that's what's crazy is I work with Mish every day, and even then I realize I'm not leveraging her enough for the seeds of wisdom that she has that I can certainly learn from.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna go do the value cards exercise.
You should,
because that's gonna be really fun to do. Yeah, no, she was terrific.
You let us know how that goes.
I will.
Okay, go do that.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.